What's up, everybody? It's time. It's today. Fever Sun Game 2, season on the line for Caitlin Clark. And the Fever really looking forward to this one, seeing how the Fever respond. Actually interesting to me is that the way this season progressed for the Fever and what their responses really looked like down the stretch after the Olympic break. Early in the season, I don't think anybody would argue they didn't really respond to losses well, at least from a play perspective at all, especially when they started 1-8 and they had that little winning streak to get back. But they had a couple times where they would lose and then immediately followed up with another stinker and things like that. But they really have recovered, right, in a major way. In that facet, after the Olympic break, they lose to Minnesota. They come back and score 104 against Atlanta. They lost twice to Vegas, came out and scored 110 against Dallas. When they lost to Minnesota the first time, they rattled off 5 wins in a row after that, right? And that's a sign of a growing team that learns how to win, learns how to respond, and has maturity. Well, now it's the biggest possible time for this young Fever team to respond and to a major loss. They haven't had a game like their game 1 of this series for a while, so I'll be curious what this looks like. I'm Tony East. I cover the Fever for the Next and have for 5 years now. First playoffs covering the Fever, though, so I want to do some video stuff. If you missed it, my Game 1 kind of reaction and adjustments I'm looking for in Game 2 video, you can find it right on this channel 2 videos back. And something that stood out, looking back, stuff I didn't really touch on, 69 points for the Fever in Game 1. I talked about a lot of their offensive issues and stuff that would change. That's even unusually bad outside of a poor shooting night, right? They hadn't scored below 70 since July 2nd against the Aces. That was only the second time in that stretch scoring that low, in their lowest scoring game since June 2nd against the Liberty. They were only under 73 times all year. And so, yes, I said, and I stand by this, that shooting was not the reason they lost, even though they shot so poorly. But that really shows you how bad their offense was and how unconnected they were on that end. And 40% from the field is like, not good, but it's not horrific. They had half dozen games under that last year. They won shooting 39% against the Sky at one point this season. Their playoff game, they were 21.4% from deep. That would have been their second lowest number during the regular season. They actually won twice in 3 of their worst shooting three-point percentage games this season. If they can find ways to get inside or cut or at least have other ways to offensive success, shooting isn't everything, even though the raw number is so drastic. But they did not ever win scoring such a low amount. They had 1 win scoring less than 78, that 71-point win I mentioned over the Sky. So they have to get their offense going in some way. I talked about some of those ways in the last video, playing through Leah Boston, getting some Clark, Kelsey Mitchell actions going. Something else I want to talk about is their rotation and potentially a change, right? To me, if they're going to do what they did in Game 1, which was playing Alyssa Smith the very start of each half and then very scarcely the rest of the game in any moment, they should not start an Alyssa Smith. And I'm not saying that because I don't think Alyssa Smith should play. In fact, I tweeted this right after Game 1. I think Alyssa Smith should play more than she did in Game 1, but not with that first group, because I think what Christy Sides and the Fever are trying to do, and I actually think this is pretty smart against the way the Sun plays, they want speed on the floor. They want to be able to play fast, play their tempo, play their style. And if they can't do that, they want as much shooting as possible. What does that look like? That looks like Temi Fagbenle a lot of the time. She is the speed one. She can switch more on defense. She's got more tempo, at least within the Fever scheme on offense. Not saying that she's faster or anything like that than Alyssa, but it's just how she's played this season. And when it comes to shooting, Damiris Dantas, who was one of their most effective shooters in that first playoff game, makes sense in that way. So if they wanted to, they could start Temi Fagbenle, who fits in really well with that starting 5, then bring Alyssa Smith off the bench and basically be the de facto backup center, I think, where she is behind Aaliyah Boston but can play more, toggling between the backup 4 and 5, and then playing with Dantas, who can shoot. I think you get more balance in the front court that way and still allow Alyssa Smith to play to her strengths, because 8 minutes and 53 seconds for her was much less than I expected, even though I get why they turned that way. Again, Dantas and her 12 points were really helpful. Temi has been great for the Fever all season. Their front court has a lot of players that deserve minutes. So how they sort that out will be very revealing. And I think one way to get everybody on the floor when the Fever want them to be, when Christy Sides want them to be, with what their strategy suggested should be, would be start Temi Fagbenle and have Alyssa Smith come off the bench. That's just what I would do. I'm not sure what the Fever will do or if they'll make any lineup changes, but we've seen Christy Sides be willing to very often make adjustments to their lineup if she thinks that there's a matchup advantage they could get somewhere else, and I think that's a key way to do it, because Melissa Smith, 1 shot, 1 rebound in 9 minutes. Like, you're not maximizing her talents in that way. And I'll never forget interviewing her a few years ago after she played extremely well in Athletes Unlimited in the offseason. And she talked about playing really well because she was getting a lot of reps in the paint, kind of in a center-like role. That, I think, playing her like this way I've described is a good way to do that. I think the Fever need to find ways to get Lexi Hall more attempts from deep. I don't know how confident they should be in her shooting. She was amazing after the Olympic break, but her whole career percentages are what they are. Obviously unbelievable this season, 47% from deep. She only took 2 a game, but that spacing is something that the Sun have to react to, right? She shot it so well that she's defended differently now. She took 2 threes in the first game of this series. If I'm the Fever, I'm trying to get up more threes via their best shooters, right? Especially after the game they had early. And I think Lexi Hall's shot per game numbers are held down by her smaller role early in the season, but in that, post-Olympic break stretch when she was just on an absolute heater, I mean, she was taking much more than that 2 per game, close to 3, and that includes 3 games to end the season where she took 1 in every game, but was getting guarded much more strongly. It was well over 3 per game for the first 11 games out of the break when she could not miss at all, right? So I think that there's some idea for the Fever to, if they want to improve their spacing and get up threes in a way that the way they did post-Olympic break when they were the best shooting team in the league, try to find ways to get Lexi Hall more involved, because especially if the Sun are going to be afraid of her shot, in those 4-on-3 situations I talked about in my last video where, if they send 2 to Caitlin Clark or Kelsey Mitchell with the ball, someone's got to be open. It might not be Lexi Hall. Well, if she's not open, that means there's space somewhere else. And if she is open, they should get her the ball for a 3. That's something else I'd be looking at a little stronger if I'm the Fever, because everything else about their shot distribution looks pretty good to me. Kelsey Mitchell at 20, she was making them. She's got to make her threes. Clark at 17, she got up 13 threes. Like, that's all good. I think they're happy with who took what shots. I don't think they should be beating themselves up over that. In fact, they said it after the game, right? You can watch the press conferences on this channel. I was there listening. Like, they liked the threes they got. They just did not make them, and that their ball movement was pretty good. Clark had her 8 assists, right? Boston got 11 boards. They did a lot of stuff that was very fevery. 5 assists for Kelsey Mitchell is above her season average. I think stylistically they have to feel good about what they were trying to do on offense. They just couldn't make anything. So similar-ish shot distributions, maybe pivot a few more threes from those guards to Hall to make the spacing work more. Keep that tempo up. Those are some other adjustments that I didn't touch on in the first video that I'll be looking for tonight. And on the other side of that, the Sun. No Ty Harris at all, right? 3 minutes. Well, I guess we don't know that yet, but I would strongly assume someone sitting in a boot on the bench in Game 1 does not play in Game 2. If Ty Harris does play, that's huge for the Sun, both for this game and for the rest of the postseason. But if Ty Harris does not play, and Veronica Burton and Marina Mabry have to play more, one, I think the Fever need to attack Marina Mabry more. Her offense is incredible. Her defense is a little wobblier. With the Sky earlier this season, the Fever were able to pick on that matchup with Mabry. And 2, if it's Burton playing a lot, Burton played a very good Game 1, I thought, filling in for Ty Harris, but that's not as strong of a defender. How that changes the way that the Sun are structured will be to be determined, because they did a really good job adjusting on the fly, but that's something they've got to pick at more, right? That's not easy, but an easier matchup than was expected to come the Fever's way. Run through whoever Burton or Mabry is guarding more often, because Dejanay Carrington's done a wonderful job defending Clark and Kelsey Mitchell this season. So has Ty Harris. And Bonner was a huge adjustment for the Sun, putting her on Clark, but that means one of the guards is on someone else smaller, whether that's Hull or Mitchell or whoever. So play through that player, like Lexi Hull shots or whatever more. And on the other end, whoever's guarding Veronica Burton needs to be extremely disruptive, right? Because Veronica Burton played a good game, 3 for 4, but not thought of as that offensive threat. Very good player, to be clear. I'm a big Veronica Burton fan, but in terms of compared to what they had with Ty Harris, that's a big change. And they've got to do better on Mabry. That's easier said than done. There's a reason the Sun traded for her. She's an amazing player, Marina Mabry. She's always done well against the Fever, right? There's a reason that teams keep wanting to trade for her. The Sky from Dallas, and then now the Sun from the Sky. She got super hot, and some of it was just that she got room to get them up, and she had a bad first half, so I get the Fever not being all over it, but if the Sun are going to rely on her more, that has to be more of a defensive focus, because I think the Fever will look back and be pretty happy with the way they defended MVP candidate several years running, Alyssa Thomas, right? Dejanay Carrington and Duana Bonner made some tricky shots. Bree Jones, 2 for 7 from the field. right? The bench was really good for the Sun. If they can find ways to shut down Burton, slow Mabry just a bit, I think that would go a long way with those offensive adjustments I already talked about in the last video and the rest of this one and making this a game. Can't wait to see it. We'll have press conferences with more reactions from me after the game, 7:30 tonight. Hope you guys enjoy the game. We'll see you very soon after it.